Girl from Yesterday, a young adult paranormal novel by Joshua J. Mark, coming out through Trestle Press in 2012. Chapter 1, in part. All through the night my dreams fell in whispers, soft whispers behind my eyes. I was with my mom in the silver Subaru wagon driving down from Maine in the darkness, and the fog was thick, and the trees ran toward us from the sides of the road. We were leaving something behind us. Long, slender reeds of rain twisted down from the night sky into the headlights and vanished, and I felt so sad that whatever it was we had lost and left back behind us at the old house on the familiar road. Inside the car, by the dim light of the dashboard, I looked over at Mom, and then the whole thing slowly dissolved, piece by piece, like watching a puzzle come apart. And I was below deck on a ship, sitting up quickly in bed. There was water at my feet, and I screamed and ran toward the door, yelling someone's name, someone who was behind me. The water was rising quickly, ice cold, up my legs. And I had the door open, and in the corridor there were many other figures in the darkness, hurrying through the water, and some crying and others screaming. I remembered where the stairs were from my room, but I could not find them in the darkness, and then, just as quickly, I was again sitting back in the car on the long, long ride down from my home, passing by tall houses which seemed to flinch and hunch under the downpouring rain. I woke up the next morning to birds singing outside my windows and stared up at the unfamiliar ceiling above me, and honestly, the actual car ride down to New York seemed like a dream, while that dream was all of my reality. The sadness of the dream ride was all that was in my head, clouding my eyes with tears, and for a moment I didn't even care that I did not know where I was. I just knew I was not home anymore, and wherever I was, what could it matter? Then slowly, hearing the birds through the open windows, my life came back to me. My name is Rebecca Pender, and that summer, when all this went on, I was 13 years old. I used to live with my mom and dad in Maine, in the little village of East Waterboro, just outside the city of Saco. It was a pretty great life for 12 years, as far as I could tell. My mom was an English professor, and my dad an architect. And we used to travel all over the place. It never bothered them a bit if I missed some school or whatever, because they always knew I would do well, and my grades were always good. My best friend, Emily Tanner, lived just down the road from me. We used to catch the bus into Saco in the summers and hang out at Old Orchard Beach all day. Just the two of us. Or, sometimes, we'd meet up there with our other friends. We would walk the pier out to the end, checking out what new shops had turned up, and, always more important, checking out the cute boys in their bathing suits. At night, we would go on the rides by the beach if one of our parents could make it as chaperone and give us all the ride back home. We lived in this lovely little house, which was made up of stone halfway up, and then an old clapboard painted a light blue, and it had ornate white trim and dark green shutters. The stones were large and round in the foundation, and when I was little, I used to like to sit in the grass with my back against them because they were so cool in summer. Our house reminded me of something out of a fairy tale. It was like someone, long ago, had begun building a castle, and then ran out of those huge round stones because, who knows, maybe a witch put a curse on him and he forgot where the stones were, and so he had to finish off his home in wood. The upstairs, which was where my room was, lent itself to my castle theory. There were 3 floor-to-ceiling windows which looked down on our quiet street and all the other houses, and I used to feel like a princess sitting there on the windowsill with a book, gazing out across my kingdom. I had a great room, too, with all of my books categorized by subject and the dark wood shelves and this really cool illustrated timeline of Scottish history which ran around the wall. My dad's from Scotland, and I got the timeline on one of our trips we took to Inverness. I had all my favorite posters up on the walls, too, of my favorite bands like My Chemical Romance and Avenged Sevenfold, and a large poster my mom had picked up for me at a garage sale once of Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce as Sherlock Holmes and Watson. It was a genuine movie poster from Hound of the Baskervilles. I loved reading Sherlock Holmes stories when I was a kid. So anyway, like I said, it was a pretty great life, and I could not imagine anything better, and I mean for all 3 of us. But then there was this one night where, after dinner in our little castle in the woods, Mom and Dad said we had to have a family talk in the living room. It was the strangest talk of my life. Well, up to that point anyway. Dad was in the big maroon chair over by the window, but he wasn't relaxing back in it like he always did. He was sort of hovering on the edge of it, leaning forward into the room as though he were about to jump. Mom did not sit at all. She paced back and forth across the room while she talked, and her hands kept sort of jumping around at the ends of her wrists, and her arms flailed, really, like weird banners. I was sitting on the couch and kept sort of sideways looking at Dad while she talked, because, seriously, the way the guy was sitting, I was expecting him to leap out of that chair any minute and just pounce on her. I could always read Dad pretty well, but that night, I had nothing. I don't care if you're a psychic for real or whatever. Put you in that room that night, and I'll bet anything you couldn't have read him either. I'd sort of stopped paying attention to whatever Mom was saying, because it was all full of long, long ropes and braids of words strung together about how we grow as people, and sometimes we develop in different ways and come to see the world from angles which become more distant in time. And of course, there were lots of lines from Shakespeare popping up in pretty much every sentence, because that's what she teaches. And it's all up there in her head, like a library, in straight rows on shelves. I could not at all figure out what was going on with Dad doing his impersonation of a high jumper statue, and I could not understand where Mom was going with this "we change as we grow" speech, which had morphed now into straight Shakespeare with all the world's a stage going on, when I hear, like really hear, Mom saying, "So honey, we've decided, your dad and I, to separate for a while and just see what happens." That line caught my attention. "What?" "It's really for the best," Mom said. "Rebecca, if you only knew." "If I only knew what?" Mom seemed to sort of deflate somehow in the middle of the living room and just looked at me sort of blankly, and then shot a look over at Dad for some help, like she always would when she was feeling lost. Dad just sat still, perched on the edge of the chair like he'd been, looking down at the braided rug on the floor. "Perhaps what your mom wants you to know," he said, and looked up at me, "is that none of this has a thing to do with you, darling. And you're very loved, and by the both of us. Nothing changes that." "But, okay, but what's that mean? I mean, why? You're separating, like what people do before they get a divorce?" "That'd be right," Dad said quietly. "But why?" "Well, Jesus, Rebecca, I just explained all that." "Well, somehow I must have missed the explanation in between the Shakespeare class. Could you say it again in English?" "Rebecca," Mom said, and her eyes were shining really brightly, and she had that tone she used to get before she'd yell, "Go to your room." Her eyes softened a little, though, and she said, "We just feel we'd be happier right now in our lives if we were living apart." "Oh," I said. "Oh. Well, that makes the whole thing a whole hell of a lot clearer now, doesn't it?" "Rebecca, I don't want to hear it. Good night." So I took off upstairs to my room, and I wasn't interested in hearing any more about this separation stuff. But it didn't matter what I wanted. Dad moved out a few weeks after that, and believe me, when I say moved out, I mean it. He didn't just move down the road, or across town, or up to Portland. He moved out of the state. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy the book. Coming out soon.